All right, welcome back on to the Roster Reconstruction podcast. We got myself, we have good friend, obviously co-host here, Josh Earl, and we have a special guest for this first team-specific episode of the Roster Reconstruction podcast. We have the great Charlie Cummings. You can find him on X, wherever, Twitter, at Claytheist, which I just found out about 2 minutes ago. KlayTheist 11. So Claytheist 11. I'm not going to tell you how I was pronouncing it, but it wasn't that way. Also, check out at Warriors Invite for the podcast. He is one of the hosts or the host of the Warriors Invitational podcast. So definitely make sure to check that out. Josh, we're going to get to you, of course, but Charlie, first as the guest, how are you doing today or tonight?
Yeah, no, I'm doing fantastic. I'm glad that we got this in the works once we had our little Swish Theory Mountain Office meetup, and yeah, man, it's a good and bad time to be talking Warriors, especially in this context of how does this get fixed. So I'm super excited for it.
I could only imagine the struggles and the pain, but we'll dive into a little bit more just because that's what we do on this show. Just kidding. But it will be fun to talk about it. Josh, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right, man. Long day of fussy baby, but ready to chat Warriors context with two good buddies and two Swish Theory Mountain Office colleagues.
I love that name. Shout out to Josh for that. Yeah, we're holding it down out here on I would say the west side, but the Colorado area.
Mountainside.
Definitely a lot of fun. Mountainside. There we go. Holding down the mountainside. That's what it is. But yeah, let's talk about the topic of the hour. The Golden State Warriors, who are sitting right now 11th in the Western Conference. They lost I would say a key player in Chris Paul for the next couple weeks. With the hand injury, they gained a player who was presumably, mulling retirement. And now, he's making his triumphant return in Draymond Green. And they just got, I don't even know mollywop the word. That's the word that came to mind. Let's just say demolished by the Raptors just last night. So the Warriors right now, they're in a weird state. I would say just a bad state. Charlie, what are your thoughts, I guess, as of right now with this Warriors team as they stand? We can kind of go into the before, the after, and all of that from there.
Yeah, actually, you said a sentence that probably really well encapsulates where the Warriors at is Chris Paul being out, and you said maybe an impact player. That really says a lot about where we are right now. You would think that acquiring a guy like Chris Paul and adding him to this team would have a massive impact, but it has not had the impact desired. And another good point there, we've got Draymond coming back after his, very close call with retirement. And before we get into all that, I just got to give a shout out to the LeBron James and Rich Paul school of media management, because that is a real savvy move, bringing up retirement to duck the things that you have done that are not giving you good press. Albeit in much less convincing fashion than LeBron James, because of the whole LeBron still being really dominant in all of these things. And I don't know, maybe Draymond's decided that if he can't kick and punch and stomp his way through the Western Conference, then this game's not worth playing anymore. But more on the team side. It's just been a real weird season. I feel like this kind of goes back to that 2020, 2021 year where they still had a whole lot going wrong. They were still trying to get guys back from injuries, including Clay being out. Draymond was struggling with back issues, made a whole bunch of rough moves, and ended up, obviously, as we all know, in the play-in, getting cooked by the previously mentioned LeBron James and John Morant on game winners, and just going out with a real bad taste. But, as we all know, the season after that was great. Winning a championship, great. It does not have the same vibe that it used to, because the Warriors people that I talk to, my friends, people I write with, people I do my shows with, we were all like, no, this is a bump in the road. There are reasons to feel like we can get back. there aren't as many of those reasons anymore, if I'm going to be honest, because, it feels like this is still a team that's relying on Steph Curry to carry the load. Being as old as he is, he just can't do it to the same degree he used to. And, Klay Thompson's had his struggles. Andrew Wiggins has seemingly gone back to his Minnesota days of just like complete apathy out there on the court. Draymond Green can't stay on the court because of the aforementioned stomping and kicking and punching. So, yeah, it just feels like a really weird time. And, now we've got all this news piling up of their two key draft picks from a few years ago, Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, both having issues with their roles. And it just feels like everything around this team is in a very weird state right now. And it's never felt more apparent that things really need to get shaken up, both from a roster perspective and from just a general internal mentality and goal alignment, if that makes sense. So, yeah, no, very, very weird time to try to figure out where this Warriors team is right now and where they're headed.
Which makes it the perfect time to talk about them on roster reconstruction, and kind of dive into the team specific context and how, on roster reconstruction, we talk about a lot of team building philosophy, approaches, all that sort of stuff. But every single team is a different team, even from season to season. So being able to kind of dive into the specifics of what makes this Warriors front office, like their recent decisions. Sorry, I'm a little sick. Trying to not cough into the mic.
Is this your flu
their
game,
recent
Josh?
decisions and like their upcoming decisions, because they find themselves in an interesting situation in terms of cap. Chris Paul is basically functionally an expiring contract. Klay is expiring after this season. I think Kuminga and Moody become extension eligible this offseason. Like, there's a lot of interesting decisions that they're facing. And because they are the Warriors, with the history that they've had over the last like 12-ish years or so, it changes how they're probably going to and how they could approach these decisions. And that's why we wanted to bring Charlie on and talk a little bit about how all of that specific context shapes how this particular team is going to approach these challenges versus a more generalized, here's how teams might do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting part too, where the Warriors are at, because Bob Myers. Funny enough, I was just talking with a friend before this. I never really understood why his perception as a general manager was as high as it was. And obviously, there's a lot of internal stuff that we, the fans, will never really know, and there's a lot of dynamics of keeping guys together and the way you go about managing contracts and all that stuff. But the guy, outside of his first draft, where he came in and, he gets Harrison Barnes, who is the big guy that they tanked for, but also Draymond Green, obviously both integral pieces of that first championship. And in the case of Draymond Green, of 3 more to come after that. And then he kind of hits a long skid in the draft. Really did not add a whole lot of supplemental talent, with the exclusion of Kevon Looney. Jordan Poole was a great hit, but we all know how that happened. One of his draft picks punched the other one, and then things fell apart. So, yeah, no, it was a weird dynamic, and I think the thing with Bob that most stuck out was that he wanted to wait on everything. And, in this case, patience was a virtue when it came to that 2022 championship game. Uh, 2022 championship season. But Mike Dunleavy is not that guy. Mike Dunleavy is coming in. He shakes things up immediately by getting Jordan Poole out the door right from the get-go. He makes some more aggressive free agency signings and draft picks. Usually the Warriors were kind of going with the younger guys and trying to bet on some upside to get in here. And instead, here goes Mike Dunleavy getting a 4-year guy in Trace Jackson Davis, who's becoming an immediate contributor. And Brandon Pajemski, who had that second year at Santa Clara and obviously really popped off, has become a huge part of this. But a very Bob Myers-like thing to do was for Mike Dunleavy last week to say, hey, we've got like a roughly 15 to 20 game evaluation window before I decide what to do here. So to go out in the open and say, hey, everyone's on notice. I'm going to have to shake this up in a big way at the deadline if we don't get some movement here in terms of production and consistency and finding roles that work for guys. So that kind of leaves the Warriors in a very interesting state, because before it was just like, they're likely just going to wait things out and weather the storm and count on Steph, Clay, and Draymond to bail them out. But I don't think Mike Dunleavy's really operating that way. He's going to make some moves. So that definitely makes it a lot more interesting for us doing this show, where we get to talk about things that may actually happen. They're about moves that can be done that might actually go down.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that does give it some additional nuance in terms of possibilities here for this Warriors team. I mean, as it stands right now, like we said, 11th, in the West, middle of the pack offensively. I think a lot of that on the back of Steph Curry, of course. 11th in offensive rating, defensive rating, 22nd. But somehow, you take the two and they're in the middle of the pack net rating. They're 17th, right? But I think that belies a bigger concern, which is the roster, the construction of the roster in terms of how to get players on the floor, right? In theory, I was one of those people. I don't know your thoughts, Charlie, or Josh as well. I thought that Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga could work, and that the numbers have not been great, but just give him some run. Well, I saw it, saw it a night ago, and I changed my tune, right? But you don't have enough shooting on the floor, but then when you have more shooting, that's at the that you're giving away defense and rebounding and versatility on that side of the floor, and it's like a mixed match where everywhere you go, there's always a hole somewhere else. I think a lot of it too was on Klay Thompson, and not in the he's been negative, but I'm saying back in his prime, in his heyday before the injuries and everything, he was someone who could guard 2 through 4. You could even say 1 through 4, right? And held up strength-wise for a minute on switches on 5s for a minute until rotation comes and that sort of thing. And now, I feel like he's a 4. I feel like he defends 4s. The lateral quickness is shot, and I get it, and it's unfortunate, but there's nothing going there, And he was always someone who strength-wise could do a 4-5, but in situational matchups. And now, just by that basis, he has to be there. So I just think, you have those issues. You bring in more creation. You bring in Brandon Pajemski. He's been playing great, but he's a smaller guard. You have him. You have Chris Paul and Steph Curry on lineups. That bleeds rebounds. You haven't had a very good season from a Kevon Looney, in my opinion. Definitely been a letdown from him. And like you said, you're not getting the Andrew Wiggins that is engaged. And so you have guys like Moody, who I think should be getting more running. Kuminga, who, I think on other teams would have a more prominent role. He's not a perfect player by any stretch. I wouldn't even say he's a great player, but I think he's a very solid player who has been bounced around as well. So I guess my question is when we're going to talk about what can possibly be done moving forward, but has there been anything in-house that Steve Kerr has not utilized? Has he really, expended every opportunity that you think that he's had at his disposal, or are there some untapped rosters and potential there that he is reticent to mix with? Kind of what is your gauge on that?
So the interesting thing for me is that he has toyed with a lot of different things. He's made the decision to bench Kevon Looney for Trace Jackson Davis, even with both guys fully healthy. So that was a big one. There have been some injuries that have mixed in that have kind of thrown things off. Like you said, Chris Paul with the fractured hand, that's going to change a lot of things. But, a main thing, and I've even seen this bleed outside of normal Warriors Twitter and discussions, is what's going on with Moses Moody. And that's really been my main complaint so far this year. because Moses has been consistently one of their better players when he's out there. The defense plays at a much higher level when he's on the floor, not only because he's doing a pretty solid job at containment on the perimeter, but he's a really good rotator. And with a defense that's flying around as much as they are, that's a big deal. I was especially confused. That was kind of one of those rare moments where, you feel like, I feel like as writers, we kind of go into this with the assumption, uh, whatever I'm seeing out there, the coaching staff and the front office and all of these things, they are definitely also seeing this. So to me, it was confusing when putting my heads together with all the good Warriors people, we agreed that outside of Draymond Green, the best rotational guy from the weak side and as a low man is Moses Moody on this roster. And so you would think with Draymond Green being out of the equation, they'd want to give him a little more run. No, he still ends up riding the bench. Gary Payton gets hurt. You'd be like, oh, okay, well, now the bench backcourt needs a little bit more defending, some length, some rebounding, and a guy who can make catch and shoot shots. Nope, he still rides the bench. And now Chris Paul is out, and Steve Kerr said, yeah, he's back in the rotation. But, to me, that just doesn't really make as much sense because it's like, yeah, I get it. Now you just need bodies, but Moses is more than a body. So I still think there are pieces available in-house that can be worked with. I guess if you had to say my top three, it would be keep Andrew Wiggins on the bench, give Moses Moody more playing time, and continue to start Jonathan Kuminga even when Draymond Green gets back. Like if you have to start small, go for it, and then you can play with closing lineups from there. Or if you're just starting him at the 3 and you have Trace Jackson Davis playing at the 5, I think that's the way to go. Because Corban, the point you said earlier, the Warriors should be a much better offensive team. And if guys are going to key in on Steph and Clay the way that they do, you need a roll man and a dribble handoff runner that's a legitimate threat to catch the ball, put it on the deck a couple times, even just a straight roll to the rim, go get some finishes, draw contact, do whatever he needs to do. And that's what Trace offers that Kevon Looney just can't offer anymore. So that's a big move for me too, is I think Trace has earned his spot in the starting lineup and needs to stay there going forward just to take the offensive pressure off their other players.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an excellent point. Josh, you have anything to add to that?
Not in particular. I think, like Charlie said, Kerr has done a lot of tinkering, but we're still not seeing enough of Kuminga and Moody. And so more of that would be nice. But the follow-up question to that, though, is if you do give Moody and Kuminga more playing time, is that enough to actually nudge this back in the direction that you're kind of hoping for?
Yeah, that is another point worth giving is, the reason I'm hesitant to say like, oh, like people always say like the talent's there with this team. And I don't think that's necessarily the case because, they've still like these guys have still gotten a lot of minutes. They've had a lot of playing time. They've mixed a lot of lineups. And like you said, Corban, 17th in net rating. Cleaning up rotations and things on the margins is not going to get you from 17th in net rating to where you need to be. Because let's be honest here, if you have Steph, Clay, and Draymond on this team, you've got guys who have won 4 championships together and who are still playing great basketball. Anything less than being in the conversation for a championship is a disappointment. And is Steve Kerr going to tweak all the right rotations and the starting lineups to get them to the championship conversation? No. Like, that's just not the case with this team, especially with the health struggles that they've had and with just how, we've seen that they just look small. They don't look as athletic as other teams. They have a lot of glaring issues that need bigger swings. that need roster shakeup to actually get them to where they need to be. Because, I know I speak for Warriors fans in saying that you can't be having a 35-year-old Steph Curry and just be like, we'll get him next year. That's not an option.
Completely agree, and I think that's why it's interesting to think about the context of this upcoming offseason, where again, Chris Paul's contract's functionally an expiring deal. Clay is no longer going to be under contract. You have those options for extending Moody, Kuminga, etc. Like, there's a lot of interesting decisions that you can pivot in a variety of directions this offseason. And so that gets me to the next question, I guess, which is you almost are kind of faced with a dual pathway. Dual things haven't worked well for the Warriors as much as they tried. But
two. What's a word? What's a word that goes with two? I'm trying to think here.
But yeah, like you kind of are faced with two potential options here. One, you can take a big swing, like say move CP3's deal, Kuminga, and salary filler to Toronto for Siakam and additional salary filler. And you can try to really make a push for this season. And then the nice thing is, if that doesn't work, you can let Pascal walk. You can let Clay walk. You can have all of a sudden almost a reset. Not necessarily a full reboot, but a reset. The question, though, is is it worth giving up Kuminga for that? And if you were to get somebody like Pascal, is that enough to nudge you back into that meaningful odds of actually reaching the finals and getting lucky? But I think it's interesting that they have a chance to potentially go a little more in this season and still have the opportunity to be like, hey, this isn't working anymore. We can try to figure out what we want to do going forward in the offseason, and we'll have a lot more flexibility in how we go about that. We could either try to retool more around Steph and Pascal and, see if we can bring Clay back at a number that maybe we feel more comfortable with. See if Draymond won't retire and if he'll continue going to therapy. See what we can do. Or we can choose to go okay, this core is not really working for us anymore. Let's see if we can move Wiggins, if we can move Looney. You could even, I doubt it, but it's even one of those things where you could raise the question of maybe we should move Steph and get what we can. If we're gonna, I'm with you, Charlie. I'm just throwing it out there because it is technically an option. I wouldn't imagine that they do it, but if you wanted to recharge and truly reboot, you're going to get the most for Steph because, yes, he's 35, but he's still amazing, and a lot of teams would give up a lot for him. So it's this broad range of options, and I'm curious to see how they approach it.
Yeah, so that's an interesting part of it, too, is that this season, the Warriors are $42 million beyond the tax line, which is wild. But the way that the tax rules are is you either have, let's say they go into this offseason and let's say hypothetically they've traded for Pascal Siakam, and let's assume that Wiggins is part of the deal because he seems more likely wing for wing and, just the way he's playing and all that. That would still leave them pretty much around that number going into next season. And so if Pascal walks, that money is just gone. There's no retooling you can do if he walks and so really what I'm trying to say there is like they'd have to tear it all the way down from a salary perspective just to get the room to start to retool. And that would mean a lot of assumptions. That would think, okay, Pascal's gone. We've gotten Klay Thompson at, let's say, half the number, like $20 million a season, which I think would be pretty reasonable. Maybe they go up to 25. But that would leave them, best case scenario, 15 or 20 million in cap space. It's not enough to go out there and get the max salary player that they would need, the one that they would be trying to get in Pascal. And, maybe you make some other moves. Maybe it's Chris Paul being shed for salary, or I'm pretty sure he can just be cut because he doesn't have a lot of guaranteed money going there. But, like you said, on these two paths, the one path where they can theoretically retool in the offseason requires a whole lot of salary assumptions that they need to make, which makes it a little dubious. And that's why, I don't envy having Mike Dunleavy's job right now, because he has the job of, you have to go out and make this team as good as possible for this season, but you also have to hedge your bets and look at the next couple of years and see, okay, I want to push the chips in, but I also don't want to leave us, holding the bag next offseason where we're just going to be stuck with a whole bunch of mediocrity and no way to essentially upgrade on it. So option 2 is where they just keep going deeper and deeper into this insane luxury tax bill that they already have. And that would require getting players in the fold who at least want to sign extensions or that have salary for next year. So that's why you see a lot of talk about Lauri Markkanen, guys like him. If you're kind of looking around the league, it gets a little tougher for like guys who can help them now, but also have salary for next year. But Toronto has some guys like not only Pascal if he signs an extension, but Jakob Poeltl would be an option. Dennis Schrader would be an option. Who, if anything, are getting upgraded in the eyes of the team because they have money on the books for upcoming seasons, as opposed to downgraded, where, a more reasonable contending team that's not paying $180 million in a tax bill would probably think, hey, if we trade for this guy, it doesn't work. We let him walk. We can do other things. That option is really not there for Golden State. So that's why I think, the trade part, and, you made a good point there, Josh. Like, there's a reason why Bob left, because this is a hellacious thing to try to navigate. Like, you already have limited assets. You have no money to work with in free agency. And you have a core with serious flaws, but also unbelievable expectations. So it's not an easy problem to solve. But ultimately, I think that the Warriors will try to add more at the deadline, specifically trying to add salary that they feel can work into next year's team as well, or at least positioning themselves in a way where they can make some upgrades, see how it goes, and then still retain a lot of tradable salary for next offseason if that's the opportunity that they really think that they can take.
I'm glad you brought up like some trades. I would definitely want to talk about that a little bit more, like trade targets, especially if we consider the Warriors as a team that is expected to make trades to continue to contend, right? Like, yes, I personally think the build it down. I think maybe last year would have been a good time if we were thinking that, but honestly, like, I get it. The Warriors last year were definitely thinking more contention than they are now, right? I'm just saying in terms of the draft class, but given where they are now, like, Sure, that can happen. I doubt it'll happen this upcoming season. So when you think about trades, and you mentioned a few, and I want to talk in more in depth, Malari Markkinen, as Josh is bringing out, just another player I was thinking, and I definitely want to get your thoughts on him in addition to whoever you're thinking of as targets. But he's not a great fit, but he does have a big contract. He's definitely going to be on the team for years to come. Jeremy Grant.
Ooh. See, now Jeremy Grant, that's one that I haven't heard thrown out a whole lot, but he definitely fits not only the timeline. If I'm right, he's still on the better half of 30, which feels crazy considering how long I've been watching this man play professional basketball.
For real.
Yeah, just about to turn 30. But yeah, still got a few more years. His number is not that much higher than Andrew Wiggins. So realistically, it's basically Wiggins and Kuminga gets you the salary you need, and then you can work from there. I think he's really interesting because we know, and he's been fascinating to me too because we've seen him scaled up and down so much throughout his career. We've really seen him scale up as a scorer, and the converse of that is the defense kind of falls off a bit. But we've also seen him play more of a role where his job is to slash a bit, knock down shots from the corners, and play really aggressive defense. And if that's, if he's somewhere in the middle of that, where he's offering a lot defensively, but he's still knocking down shots, he's still remaining having that opportunistic aggression on the offensive side of the floor. I think that would be a really good move. And we've seen, Portland, not exactly a team looking to contend even within these next 3 years that Jeremy has on the books. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's the kind of player that can be very attainable. And I think he does solve a lot of their problems. So yeah, it does kind of surprise me that you don't see Jeremy Grant thrown into those conversations as much as Pascal or Lauri Markkinen or even Zach LaVine, who's getting thrown out there recently. So yeah, it's that'd be a good one. I like that, Corban.
Appreciate that. He's definitely someone I've been thinking a lot more about. But I mean, what are some other guys that you're looking at? Whether they're big 10-pull guys. Okay, first off, indulge me. Why doesn't Zach LaVine work in Golden State? And this isn't really for me, but I just want to get it out there for the record on this podcast. And then after that, I want to hear some targets that you're thinking of. We already discussed a few that whether they're like big fish, if you will, because their contract or the role that they have played or could play, or even guys like around the margins. Like I think Kelly Olynyk would be great in Golden State. But I want to get your thoughts on the great LaVine first.
Yeah, LaVine, it's nothing against him as a player necessarily because, I think he's obviously incredible at what he does. He's one of the better scorers that we have in the game right now. The concerns for me are, one, the fit. I don't doubt that offensively he would be great as a movement shooter, as a guy who gets to play off Steph Curry. You could certainly make an argument that he would be the second best scorer Steph has played with next to Kevin Durant. I think just with what LaVine can do on the drive and the mid-range, he's a much more refined offensive player than Clay has ever been. But that other end, it would be a different conversation to me if we could rely on Draymond Green being on the field, on the court. But yeah, the prospect of a Steph, LaVine, Clay perimeter defensive group opening and closing games, that's a lot to overcome. And maybe if this was 2016 to 2020 Draymond, where he was still one of the better defensive floor raisers in the game, up there with Rudy Gobert and Anthony Davis, that kind of caliber, then sure. But he's really not that guy. And you also have a diminished Kevon Looney. You have Trace Jackson Davis, who, outside of just chasing around blocks and rebounds, isn't bringing you a whole lot. So that's kind of my concern is, this team's already struggling to just flat out outscore teams. And so how much is Levine adding to increase that margin to make up what he is not bringing on the defensive end of the floor?
That's a good one. I definitely agree with you there. I mean, offensively, I think that fit would be great. Defensively, yeah, it's rough. And I mean, a few of those guys, I feel like that's the thing. I don't know if there is this panacea for this current iteration of the Warriors. Like, even if, yes, they're going to go and pursue trades to be better, what does that look like? Playing? Like, either way, I think they probably get as good as maybe eighth. I mean, I don't look at them as like a team that's really going to make strides in this Western Conference, given the lack of cohesion they've had, of course, the injuries, and the fact that any player you get right now, I mean, any player that's available right now, I don't think, that's like a shoehorn fit. Like, even if they had gotten OG and Anunoby, like, as good as he would have been on that team, who they would have had to give up to get OG and the fit there, like, no, and now it's probably your best option available in the trade market as a guy that could be had right now. Now, is there someone to pop up in the next like 4 weeks? I'm not saying there isn't, but even if there is, I mean, what does Golden State have that can attract that team? Like, money wise, yeah, they get there. You get Chris Paul's salary there, boom. And then, whether it's, would you like Kuminga for another pick or whatever the case may be, like, you can kind of step ladder yourself to a certain point. But I mean, if they were as tantalizing prospects as, they thought they would have been traded like 2 years ago, right? Like, that's my mindset on the young guys. But I kind of want to switch gears for a second while we're still discussing what can be done. I want to talk about guys who, like, whether it's their last game or their last season for the Warriors. And like, one is on a lesser extent. I mean, it's been a short stint. That's Chris Paul. But the other is Klay Thompson. He talks about, him possibly getting a contract. You mentioned, like, I think 20 to 25 mil that you'd be okay with. But like, we've saw that, like, that's kind of stalled a little bit in terms of like negotiations there. I assume he's going to ride it out and see what happens. But like, do you think that there's like a good chance that this is his last season and he goes to another team, tries to show he's still Klay Thompson, then finds his way back to Golden State?
I think this prompts like a really interesting question, which is, as a franchise, what do you owe this core? Like, what do you owe Steph, Klay, and Draymond? And it's not as straightforward as just like, we'll just keep paying you the max until your bodies break down. There is some value to be said of like, let's get you, maybe it's not working the way we want it to work. Let's get you to a spot that's going to pay you more than we'd be able to realistically do, and give you an opportunity to be more competitive right away. Like, what do you owe this core? And is it the opportunity to maximize like championship odds? Because that might not be with the Warriors based on everything we're talking about. Is it the opportunity to maximize earnings? That would be with the Warriors, but it also doesn't really work out that well for the Warriors necessarily. And also, what do you owe this fan base, right? Like, you've been to 6 finals, won 4 of them. Before that, there was a long stretch of like, what's a nice way to say it, Charlie?
Chaos.
Sure, yeah, we'll go with that. So like, one, obviously, I think this is a fan base that has gotten used to competitiveness. But I also think this is a fan base that is ultimately going to be like, if Draymond was traded this offseason and if Klay was allowed to sign somewhere else, like, I don't think the fan base would, like, burn down the team office or anything like that. Like, I think they'd appreciate what these players have done for them, and I think the players would appreciate what the front office has done. So I think that's like an interesting question. We saw how it played out with the Lakers and Kobe, where they paid him way more than they necessarily had to. And you could argue that this was part of like a legacy thing, or, like, look at how we take care of our legends. And there's maybe some value to that. But also, like, if you really are a front office and an organization that wants to celebrate what those players are all about, and wants to continue their legacies, it's to build your team back to a high competitive standard, and that may not be with those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the next question then that I would ask is, you're right. Like, I agree. It may not be with them. How likely are the Warriors to make that happen? Like, yes, is Bob Myers as sentimental excuse me, not Bob Myers, is Mike Dunleavy as sentimental as Bob Myers is? I think the answer is no. But I am curious, like, okay, are they going to pull the plug on this? Because, yeah, we can see it. I mean, we're talking about it with, bird's eye view, but we're not actually in there, and I get that. But, like, even the way that Coach Kerr has talked to Klay Thompson, and I feel like they've all had these moments of, yeah, we're in the final stage of our career. Like, I'm very curious as to how that looks from the organizational standpoint, because we already get the fans and analyst standpoint, and I think we're getting inklings of it from the players themselves.
Also, Kerr is in the last season of his contract as well.
Did not realize that. Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, like, you could functionally, like, when I said a reset, you are right, Charlie. They wouldn't be able to open up much cap space, but they would cut their tax bill astronomically, and they'd have more of a straightforward approach. Like, we know we're pivoting this way and stuff. And the fact that Kerr might walk away, or maybe they don't bring Kerr back, that's another element of, like, again, what do you owe this core, especially if you factor Kerr in as part of this core? Like, do you keep going until the wheels completely fall off, or is it maybe better for everyone to kind of remember them at, like, relative heights? Like, they won the championship 2 seasons ago. Like, it's like, do you?
Yeah.
That said, it's also, this is why Bob walked away. It wasn't the difficulty. Bob didn't want to be the one who had to end this.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, this is going to end one way or another. It's going to happen, right? And either if Bob had, extended, now it's on Mike Dunleavy, you're going to end the greatest chapter in this franchise. You're going to. And what pressure is put on you from an organizational standpoint, from a personal standpoint, from a fan base standpoint, and from a media standpoint, to be the person who's like, you're gone, Draymond, or like, Klay, we love you, man. And if you're willing to sign like a really cheap deal, we'll bring you back. But, like, you got to understand where we're coming from. And God forbid, and again, Charlie, I'm completely with you. Don't flip me off again. Maybe talk with Steph and see where Steph's coming from, because we all know how competitive Steph is too. And if it is the situation where we've seen, like, yes, they won 2 years ago, but since then we've seen that this isn't working, right? And so, like, this is probably the best opportunity. And again, it's not a straight up rebuild opportunity where you're going to get, 27 draft picks from the Hawks or the Timberwolves. But it is an opportunity to have, like, an organizational reset in very clear terms. So I don't imagine they'll do this, because, again, there's a lot of pressure on being the person to break this up. But I think it's something they have to really, really wrestle with.
Yeah, and I think it is something that they're wrestling with right now, because, going into this past off season, I don't think there were any reasonable inklings that the core three and Steve Kerr would not be going out together in some respect. Whether that's retiring earlier than everyone expected, or riding this out for the next few seasons before, like you said, their bodies just kind of betray them. So, on the Steph note, he does still have 2 more years on his contract after this. So unless he comes and like you said, unless he goes in and has a conversation and decides it's time to go elsewhere, then I don't think that's really realistic to imagine him elsewhere. Clay is interesting, and if he's asking for too much money, then that's one thing. But he was very public about what Bob Myers did for him in giving him that max deal after he tore his ACL in the finals. He felt he was really taken care of. He felt he was appreciated. So, obviously it's different to say like, you never want to be like asking players to like return that goodwill because money is money. There's generational money on the line. And, you never want to get into that trap of like, hey, do you want to take 5-10 million less per year to stay with us and maybe have another chance at winning or winning with this team or going out having your whole career with the same guys. That's a tough ask because, these guys aren't going to get a chance to make this money forever. And that becomes a really interesting conversation. But, I think with what Clay has said, what Steph has said about Clay makes it different because Steph has really been adamant that even when Clay's struggling, Clay is the guy who helps to get him going with the attention he still commands from a defense. The way that they play off of one another is so important to how both of them find success. And I'd have a really hard time seeing a way in which they try to get this team to work without Clay being involved. Because, it's one thing to have Steph Curry, who's not only extremely familiar with the system, but is the entire basis of the system. But if you go into an offseason and it's, hey, Kerr, we either let him walk or he retired, we've traded Draymond, Clay signed elsewhere. Is there a realistic way for this team to, build up that cohesion again in time to become contenders before Steph really hits that physical decline? I don't think so. So that's why I think the Warriors really need to do everything in their power to keep Clay around. And even if that means paying him a little more than it feels like he's worth right now, I think you have to do that. And, just personally, me as the fan, I wanted to see these 3 go out together. Things have certainly changed since Draymond Green cannot stop getting himself in extremely avoidable trouble. So, if they decide, hey, like, let's just kind of play this out of it. Like, let's say for the rest of the season, Draymond's a little less aggressive, he looks less engaged, or he has another incident where he is, doing something crazy to what is more than likely a European guy. Then I think that fans would really get behind, yeah, he has to be moved in order for this team to succeed going forward. And with the way Steve Kerr has coached this team, if they say, hey, you got to go, we can't do this, Kenny Atkinson, come on up, or whatever else coach they decide, please not Doc Rivers, I will lose my mind. But if they decide to move another direction on either Kerr or Draymond, I don't think the fan base or the team would have a hard time seeing why they did that. But it's a whole different conversation with Clay. And, obviously my username kind of gives it away, Claytheist11. Clay has always been my guy. He's been my favorite Warrior. I echo that sentiment, Josh. Like, Steph is the thing that keeps the engine running, but Clay has always been just such a fun personality, such an amazing play style, and just the way he gets his is so crazy. So I think, if there's a situation where they decide we need to make more aggressive moves, I think the idea would be to retool around Steph and Clay. I don't see a world where all three go and Steph stays, and then you find a way to get back to where you need to be because of just how important is Clay is on the court and off the court to Steph.
I completely agree with you, which is why it'd have to be a very frank, honest, and difficult conversation with Steph to say, we'll work with you on how you want us to approach this, but here's what we're thinking because this isn't working. And we're not, and the thing is, even if we bring all these guys back, there's no guarantee that we're going to be contenders anyway over the next 2 seasons on your deal. So let's be honest adults. And again, I'm just pitching this from like a team building philosophy approach. I don't actually want this to happen. I love Steph. I love Clay. I want to see them retire as Warriors. But I think it's something where, given the context of the organization, how they've slipped so far just since the last championship, and how it doesn't, like, are we expecting Clay and Draymond and Kevon and Andrew Wiggins to have a bounce back year next year? Are we expecting that to happen as they all get a year older and Steph gets a year older? What's the realistic path to contention anyway? And so, again, I think it gets back to, like, what do you owe these guys? And not from, like, a callous business perspective of, like, well, now we're cutting costs because we're we want to, reduce our tax and this sort of stuff. But, like, from the perspective of what's best for all parties might be a split up. I don't think anybody would like it, but I think it's something that has to be considered. That said, I completely agree with Charlie that it's not going to happen because I don't think anybody has the stones to trade Draymond. I think a lot of people would trade Draymond, but to trade Draymond, not re-sign Clay, and to ultimately have to trade Steph. I don't think many people have the stones to have that on their executive record.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be the right thing, too. Like, the weird thing is it might be the right thing. But the media is going to hate you. The fans are going to hate you. I think the players would honestly, if you really talked it out with them, would understand. But there'd be... Also, if you're of European descent, maybe talk to Draymond about it over a phone call or a Zoom. Just saying.
I mean, Dario Saric has been okay. No, I'm playing. But
well, yeah, because Dario probably doesn't say a lot. But yeah, like I just think that this organization has such an interesting context because they've had this amazing dynastic stretch. And unfortunately, we're nearing the end of that stretch. And, like, how all that various history, all the various situations in terms of, like, the young guys like Kuminga and Moody who are kind of wanting bigger roles but can't get bigger roles because, we still got to give Wiggins minutes so that hopefully he can bounce back, Looney minutes, and then, like, there's just a lot of interesting context that I think shapes how this team can approach things that goes different from how we might view, like, almost any other team in the league.
Yeah, I definitely think this is one of the more complicated. I mean, I'm glad we're starting this whole team series or team check-in evaluation off, but this is one of the more, like, I don't want to say frustrating. I'm going to say challenging. Similar. Because frustrating is like, I mean, as a fan, like, if I were really like a fan, I'm a fan of good basketball, but if I was like a fan of the Warriors, I'd be like, what do we do? Because I would definitely think, okay, in my mind, if Corban was, Mike Dunleavy, not gonna lie to you, I'm looking at Steph and I'm saying, hey, we're gonna have to go, the final years of Dirk Nowitzki, where you are the greatest Warrior ever. These guys are your, I guess it's like a weird mix between a final years of Dirk and the final years of Tim Duncan. I mean, in the sense of, like, Tony Parker, he felt he had more to give than we thought he had. So spend your last year in Charlotte, and then you'll come back and join us, and everything will be great. Like, maybe that's Clay. I'm not saying it is, but maybe it is, or more than likely it's a Draymond type. But like for Dirk, the last couple of years, it was like, hey, we need you to losing my train of thought here. We need you to understand that our team is not a championship level, and the blueprint for that doesn't necessarily exist right now. And so we'll try to feel a competitive team with you. We'll let you be in competitive basketball for, instead of a championship, let's try to reset expectations. How does the 5th seed sound? Like something like that. But it does seem tough. But I think the Warriors have milked out every bit, in my mind, of championship equity out of this core. But at this point, yeah, age and injury have caught up with them. The roster construction of this team has been an issue. And let's not forget, the recent changes in the collective bargaining agreement has been a factor for the Warriors specifically. So I look and I agree. I guess I want to end a more optimistic note. So I guess let's talk like best case scenario for the Warriors team over the next, let's say, 2 seasons. Just kind of as we round out here, because I don't want to be like just dour and they suck. It's gonna be bad. All right, see you next time. But at the same time, like, it's not super great. So let's get some optimism here. I guess, what do you think is, we've already discussed a little bit of that, team-friendly contracts for Clay and keeping some of the core around, but what would you do in between the margins moving forward just to kind of field, yes, maybe not a championship level squad, but a playoff team, which is definitely a letdown, but also you could still be proud of the run you've had for the last decade, basically.
Yeah, so I think the major step would be take a big swing around the trade deadline. Keep some of the young guys around that we've seen be productive. Pajemski, Trace Jackson Davis. I think one of Kuminga or Moody should be staying if you can swing that. And, take the swing, see where it gets you this year, and then explore options next offseason if it doesn't get you there. Really the thing for me is we've seen multiple points in the past with the Warriors where it's felt extremely over. Like KD leaving and Clay getting hurt, being out for that same year, bringing in D'Angelo Russell. Steph immediately gets hurt. They have the worst season I've ever seen, which is saying a lot because there were a lot of bad years before the Steph era. And I think you kind of just work from there and you try to think, how can we best optimize this roster? The phrase I keep coming back to is go out on your shield. Don't mail it in. If you're Mike Dunleavy, like you said, Josh, do you want to be the guy who traded Steph Curry, who let Klay Thompson walk? And then if you watch either of those guys go on and win a title elsewhere or find more playoff success elsewhere, that's going to look really rough on you. And then not only are you the guy who broke up the best dynasty we've seen in the last 10, 15 years, but now you're the guy who helped other team win a championship with that guy. And the thing for me, too, is even if the margins are small, even if getting back to that championship level is a really small possibility, I still think you have to take it because you look at what it would mean not only for the organization, but for these players individually. Like, I feel like we've been having Steph Curry, Magic Johnson conversations for the last 4 or 5 years. Let's say they get there. Like, let's say they get that championship. Now Steph's got a whole handful of rings. He's cemented his case as the greatest point guard of all time, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of other people's opinions. He's done it all for the same franchise, the one that drafted him, the one that he stuck with when they really stunk. You look at Klay Thompson, like Klay coming back after devastating injuries to get 2 more titles. You look at Draymond Green, who really at this point is kind of in full image player rehabilitation mindset right now. And if he goes and he's a part of another championship team, then that gives him a great way to end his career. Uh, yeah. So I think if the players on this team come together, they come together with the front office, and they are realistic enough to say, "Hey, we're diminished. We can't do it the way we used to, but we still have enough. We still have enough fight in us, enough talent left in us to go get number 5." I think it's a risk you have to take because, I think every Warriors fan, we've seen the terrible years and we've seen it be really rough. Um, but I would not be willing to sell the opportunity to get that 5th championship just to make the runway after that, after this core is finally gone, a little bit smoother. Because how many teams have still not won a championship? How many teams win a championship how many different teams win a championship within a 20, 30-year window? Like, you only have so many chances being, even at this level, if the title is right up above. So, even if you're lagging a little behind, it's kind of easy to big brain it and say, yeah, we got to retool and look for the next chance. But sometimes you do everything right and that next chance still doesn't come because there's a lot of talent out there. There's a lot of very good teams. There are the other big teams that are going to keep constantly acquiring talent, like the Celtics, the Lakers. They're always going to be in that conversation just because of who they are. And yeah, I just think personally as a fan, but also as someone who's trying to look objectively at this organization, uh, you can't be having a look at the future beyond this core right now. That I don't even think that should be in your mind because it just needs to be about maximizing what these 3 can do for you, even if it's just these 2 in Steph and Clay. Um, I think that's what you really have to focus on. And if you get that 5th championship, then nobody can tell you a damn thing. if you're Steph Curry, if you're Klay Thompson, even if you're Mike Dunleavy, you're like, hey, I just stepped into like the biggest GM shoes that there are out there, and I delivered. So yeah, that's what it really is for me. Just go out on the shield. That's all we want to see.
I like that. That's a rallying cry there, Charlie. Well done there. Josh, what are your thoughts here?
He just said things so nicely. I don't want to say
Why do you
anything
think
else.
I went first?
He literally went go out on your shield. Like, what am I supposed to say? But yeah, I think the key then is I think you have to get more creative in your approach to optimizing things around Steph, Clay, and if you're still committing to Draymond, like how do we add inexpensive pieces that complement these guys in the way they need to be complemented, particularly as athleticism starts to fade, as more and more European players come into the NBA and Draymond gets more and more agitated. You need to you might not be able to get a 4th guy next to those guys. It might not be a realistic option, right? So you have to really dig in and as a team, as lineups, what are we missing? And let's target players who are specifically adept in those areas that can work with these 3 in a playoff setting. And it might not be the sexy win the press conference type moves. You might have to get muddy and gross. And, but I'm not suggesting getting giddy. No. But
Oh, that's not cool. Oh, wow.
He's Australian though, so I don't think Draymond will have a problem with him. He's not European. But I think the odds are really low, Charlie, that 5th championship is possible. But I agree with you that outside of somebody who's borderline psychopathic in terms of like not caring about the media response to like blowing this
Yeah.
up. Nobody's gonna do that. So like I think again you have to maybe get more creative and honestly probably have to start switching out from the strategy of like veterans and like young rookies and kind of doing a little bit of what they did this season with Trace and Pajimski and get like young, like mid-range type young players in the NBA, whether that's coming into the draft class as like upperclassmen who are experienced or who fit a particular need around Steph, Clay, and Dre, or like young guys who are still on solid lower cost deals that again aren't stars but can do what you need them to do around those three. And then unfortunately, and I think you're right on this, Charlie, and I think they're already at this spot honestly with most fans, like to do that you'll probably still have to give up some value because like again I don't think Wiggins is drawing a lot of interest. Like you might be able to get something for Chris Paul's contract because it's such a big expiring. But like you're probably going to have to include some draft capital or some other stuff to make an impactful move, even if it's not for a star. But I think, like you said, especially if it gets them closer to getting that fifth ring, whether you get the fifth ring or it just winds up being these four, I think once this era is truly done, Warriors fans aren't gonna like gripe about like, oh, it's been 3 years since we've been, championship contenders. What the hell? Like, I think they're gonna be like, cool, we got 4 or 5. Like, we can live with like a little down period and try to build from there. So, I think I agree with Charlie. Mostly because I don't think anybody has the stones to actually like go truly hardcore, like reset.
Yep. No, I'm
Wow.
with you there. It's just it's too much to be that guy. And like you said about fan perception, fans have short memories and they forget. And 4 titles helps you paper over a lot of things, but it's something to keep mind of.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. I mean, I'm one of these. I definitely came in thinking once we went down into like started picking away the layers, like, oh, this is worse than I thought. But I do like the fact that we ended with at least some notes of optimism for this team. I guess as we kind of close out, any last like parting words, parting shots? I'm gonna use mine to say that I really think Monte Ellis and Steph Curry could have shared a backcourt together. And who knows how many championships they would. No, I'm playing. But I'm gonna
4.
No, probably not. But I will say to close out, at least for my share of this conversation, that I definitely appreciate you coming on, Charlie, just adding some nuance and context to where these Warriors could go. And I do think these next 4 years, these next 4 weeks will be very informative as to the future direction of the Warriors, whether they go more in line with what we're talking about, whether they do acquire the stones to go in a completely different direction. Time will tell, and that time is fastly approaching. So definitely look forward to that. But yeah, it'll be something to see. I think there's a real tipping point for this dynasty, and how the final years are going to commence, because no doubt we are definitely in those final years now. And yeah, I mean, as a team, as Roster Construction, I think this will be a really good case study to look at in 6 months' time, a year, 2 years, to see, okay, how did this Warriors team see where they were, check out this inflection point, and then make adjustments moving forward, whether that is to reset and rebuild, or try to go one last rally, or just do a slow, decline into building back up. I definitely think that is a timeline I will most certainly be keeping my eyes on.
Yeah, and I just have to say that the Warriors dynasty is, and it's funny because as Charlie and Corban can see right now, I have framed pictures of Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili over my shoulder. This Warriors dynasty is actually my favorite dynasty from a construction standpoint, because as Corban can allude to, I love off-ball shot creation. And a big reason why this dynasty is a dynasty is because they have 2 of the 5 greatest off-ball shot creators of all time in the same lineup together with one of the greatest connectors of all time. And like it's like a force multiplier times a force multiplier times a force multiplier. And it's just so synergistically successful and exciting and like so much fun. That you know that it's probably, and I want, believe me, Charlie, I want them to get a 5th ring. I want those types of art. I want Clay to be able to just put a hand up and be like, talk to the hand instead of the 4. Like I want that. I want Steph to get his props as arguably the GOAT offensive player. Like the only other person I think is close is Jokic, which is saying something that these 2 happen to be playing during our lifetime and during like the times that we're really paying attention. I think is really nice. But yeah, this dynasty has been amazing. And I don't think the end is here yet. I know it's coming soon, and that makes me feel bad. But I'm still always going to love that combination of Steph, Clay, and Dre. And just how they all elevated each other to the heights that they reached.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'll always be. It is truly crazy for me, like getting. I didn't grow up in a basketball household, really a sports household, and having friends talk me into like loving basketball the way I've begun to love it, and starting with a team that was just struggling for anything, and it still just doesn't feel real. Seeing the way that this has developed, with so many different things that had to happen, but being able to watch hundreds and hundreds of games of these 3 guys playing together, specifically Steph, has just been it's such a blessing, man. It's unbelievable. And however these next few years go, really, it'll be interesting to watch, but it doesn't change my opinion of this team and how great they truly were and the kind of sustained run of excellence that they were able to put together. It's been a hell of a ride, man. And if this is the end of the ride, so be it.
Wow. Well, I think, listen, there's no other words to close out than those by Charlie. Thank you so much for coming on. Please take a few minutes to share, seconds, however long it's going to take you, I don't know, to share where folks can find you in your work. You've done a great series of articles for Swish Theory. In fact, I was on the shameless plug here. I was on the No Ceilings podcast this past weekend, and you got a shout out for one of your articles. So well done there.
Oh.
But let the folks know, where they can find you and your work on that.
Yeah. So like Corban said, we here are the Swish Theory Mountain Office. We've got a ton of talented writers, so come check it out at theswishtheory.com. A lot of great articles coming out, podcasts too. And that's where you'll be able to find all of my work. Currently 6 players into my Finding a Role series. Let's see, we got Peyton Watson, Dyson Daniels, Marcus Sasser, Goga Batadze, Aaron Neesmith, and I don't know who I'm forgetting. Sam Hauser. 6 into the series, currently working on a Nickeil Alexander-Walker piece, which I know I'm going to have a lot of fun with because that's one hell of a ride of a player. So yeah, I've been working through those, and you can check me out on my Twitter too at Claytheist11. And if you're into more Dubs-centric talk, I have my Warriors Invitational podcast with my amazing co-hosts Gotham and Matt. We do a couple episodes a week. One will be more just general Warriors talk, updates on where the team is, and all of our various thoughts on the experience that has been the 2023-2024 Warriors. But we also do a weekly episode where we bring on a guest to discuss matchup of the week, to talk about their basketball journey, to talk about the team that they cover and why they've been so interesting. So come check it out if that's what you're into.
Thank you so much for that, Charlie. Really appreciate that. And I will definitely be checking out the Warriors Invitational podcast. Josh, where can folks find you and all the things that you stay doing? You're behind the scenes kind of table setter, but you still do valuable things, and I want people to hear it.
Yeah, I'm technically taking a break from Twitter. I hopped on recently to repost something from our good friend and co-host Garrett Bouguet. So definitely check him out. I don't really do much on Twitter right now because I'm a full-time stay-at-home dad to a 14-month-old. But I am somebody who has had a lot of experience working with people in the industry and helping people take the next step in their careers in basketball. So if you're somebody who wants to work in basketball, or you're kind of been bumping up against a ceiling and you're not sure what to do to get you to where you want to be in your career in basketball, you can shoot me an email at josh@myhoopscareer.com. We'll set up a phone call and I'll see if I can help get you set on a path towards your dream job in basketball.
Well, there it is. I mean, like I said, this is what we do. Swish Theory Mountain Office represent for the first of many collaborations here on the Roster Reconstruction podcast. Listen, trying to find me, you could, if you'd like, follow me on Twitter/X at Corban NBA, CORBAN NBA. You could also follow me on Instagram as well. I don't do anything on Instagram, but the followers help just make my circle go a little bit. So definitely do that if you'd like. Check out Roster Reconstruction. Check out my podcast, Roundball Ramble. And then most recently I was on the No Ceilings Draft Sickles podcast, going over some deep takes. We did Rob Dillingham, and then we went into deeper players, and it was really fun. Really enjoyed doing that. Maxwell Bambach, I think I said it right. Yeah. And the crew over there, really cool folks, and that was a fun one. So check that out as well. But listen, y'all, this has been another great episode of the Roster Reconstruction podcast. For Charlie, for Josh, for myself, we are Frosty. Y'all stay frosty, and we'll be back here real soon. All right, y'all.